Part 88. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 871. Chapter 871 I am quite convinced. Fan Kinjao called Ningan in front of him and said, "Go and send a message to the young master of the Su family." Ningan nodded, quickly turned around and walked out. Soon, Fan Kinjao's post was delivered to Sushaoxi. Sushaoxi knew that Fan Kinjao's appointment with him was never just to pass the time by reminiscing about old times. After setting the time and place for the meeting, Sushaoxi put down all the entertainment and went to the meeting place in advance to wait. The place where Sushaoxi met was a very secret tea house. On weekdays, only the old couple were busy. Although the tea house was not big, it was remote and clean. It was indeed a good place to talk things. Fan Kinjao had no time to delay now. As soon as he saw Sushaoxi, he told him everything about the main city. Sushaoxi was surprised for a long time after hearing this. "I was originally curious as to why the merchant alliance in the main city suddenly raised its dues, but it turns out it was for you. If I acquiesce to the prices in the main city this time, I am afraid that prices will continue to rise in the future. Some people are just shameless in their face." Sushaoxi nodded in agreement. "Then what are you going to do next?" Fan Kinjao smiled coldly. "The merchant alliance in the main city can take care of things in the main city, but they can't take care of things outside the main city. Tianyu's side has also completely stabilized. In this case, let's just let Kingnanzai's all the medicinal materials come directly from Tianyu." Sushaoxi. Such a sharp knife to cut through the mess is indeed Fan Kinjao's style. "But I have no reason to help you," Sushaoxi said lightly. He had a relationship with Fan Kinjao, but he was also a businessman. He had a wife to support and a group of waiters waiting to eat. Fan Kinjao smiled softly. "Now all the shops in the main city have no choice but to increase their prices, but if others know that only the items sold by Kingnanzai still maintain the original price, what do you think will happen to other shops in the main city? Think." Sushaoxi was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes widened when he understood. It can be said that the merchants in the main city are forced to raise prices, but the people in the main city will naturally complain about the sudden increase in prices. If someone suddenly still sells things at the previous price, there will naturally be a flood of guests. As a result, it will be difficult for other merchants to not notice it. Those who open their doors to do business naturally do not want to make enemies with their customers. At that time, other merchants in the main city will not be mentioned for the time being, but those who are in the medicinal business will of course be struggling to find out what methods Kingnanzai uses to prevent price increases. At that time, Kingnanzai releases news that the Su family has channels to transport medicinal materials from other places to the main city, and all medicinal materials are guaranteed. What do you think, the young master of the Su family, will do with the Su family's business?" Sushaoxi's eyes turned green when he heard this. "Is this still necessary to ask? Of course, you will make a lot of money. The merchant alliance is indeed able to control the merchants in the main city, but there is nothing they can do about the Su family, who is solely responsible for freight transportation in the main city. To put it bluntly, the Su family and the merchant alliance have never been in contact with each other, so why should they be afraid of offending?" The conditions offered by Fan Kinjao were so tempting that there was no reason to refuse. Sushaoxi is very convinced. Looking at the main city, there are not even thousands but hundreds of merchants making medicinal materials. If they really all use the Su family's freight, wouldn't there be a lot of money? The key is that with the Su family acting as a shield in front of them, they are hiding behind Tianyu who supplies the goods, so they can't be found out at all. Sushaoxi looked at Fan Kinjao and was really curious. They all had the same head. How could Fan Kinjao always find a way to win in adversity? Compared with Fan Kinjao's head, his head seems to be unnecessary. I wonder when the princess plans to receive the first batch of goods. Susheoxi couldn't help but be eager to give it a try whenever she thought of making a fortune. Fan Kinjao looked at Susheoxi with a smile. The young master of the Su family is not afraid of becoming an enemy of concubine Yu. It is an honor for Su to serve the crown princess, even if he is the enemy of heaven and earth. Susheoxi waved his hand, which was called heroic. Fan Kinjao saw through it without saying anything, picked up the teacup in front of him and drank it all in one gulp. Nowadays, prices in the main city are constantly rising, which is naturally unspeakable for the people. Fan Kinjao naturally hopes that the Su family will make more and more moves. Susheoxi is also unambiguous. After parting ways with Fan Kinjao, and hurriedly went back to dispatch manpower. After Fan Kinjao returned to his mansion in the western suburbs, he did not go directly to his own yard, but came to the yard where Mu Yan was. In the room, Mu Yan was feeling very worried. When she saw Fan Kinjao entering the door, she quickly put on a smile and said, "Why is third sister coming here at this time, but there are not enough medicinal materials?" "Third sister, don't worry, I will come in person tomorrow. Go to the pharmacy." Before Mu Yan could finish her words, she fell into a thin but warm embrace. Fan Kinjao hugged Mu Yan, and could clearly feel that her thin body was tense due to the force. "Since you still regard me as your sister, you shouldn't hide such a big thing from me." Mu Yan was stunned for a moment, then asked in a low voice, "Does the third sister know?" Fan Kinjao slightly distanced himself from Mu Yan and nodded gently, "I have already discussed it with the Su family. It seems that the Su family has sent people out of the main city at this time. Soon Tianyu's side the medicinal materials will be delivered, but Tianyu cannot be exposed yet, so after you receive the medicinal materials, you only need to let Peng Jing settle the money with the Su family. You also have to say to the outside world that the Su family contacted the medicinal materials dealer from outside." "That's it?" Mu Yan looked at the third sister in front of her, and her eyes started to get sore. "I originally thought of dealing with it myself, but in the end I still had to bother the third sister. Does the third sister think I am particularly useless? I obviously handed over Kingnanzai. It was given to me, but I still couldn't do it well. You manage Kingnanzai very well, which is enough to show your talent in medicinal materials, but a ruler is long and an inch is short, and there are always places that people can't reach. But the third sister is omnipotent. You have to eat food in mouthfuls and drink water in mouthfuls. Haste makes waste. If you want to learn, I will leave it to you bit by bit. If you can't learn it, it doesn't matter. I will accompany you. Let's go down together." Mu Yan sniffed and said, "I want to learn, but I'm afraid that I will learn too slowly." Fan Kinjao tapped the tip of Mu Yan's nose, "You really have to learn slowly. If you learn too fast, wouldn't my third sister be useless in the future? It would make me look too incompetent." After hearing this, Mu Yan couldn't help but burst into tears and laughed. Fan Kinjao looked at Mu Yan and smiled, and he also laughed too. When he handed over Kingnanzai to Mu Yan, he really hoped that Mu Yan could take charge of it alone, but Fan Kinjao never thought of overthrowing the efforts and just did what he could. In this matter, concubine Yu was originally here for her, and the Liao family was just a sword in concubine Yu's hands. However, Fan Kinjao could not believe that the Liao family could think of things in such a complicated way. The mind can imagine it. To put it bluntly, behind the Liao family there must be experts who can make suggestions. But Fan Kinjao is not in a hurry, he always has to catch big fish slowly. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 872. Chapter 872, You have to suffer what you have done by yourself. Susheoxi acted quickly and personally led the team out of the main city that night. Tianyu has indeed been cultivating his body these days, but he does not dare to let anything loose in the shop. After hearing about Susheoxi's intention, he directly filled the cart with the medicinal materials on the list. Susheoxi really admired the daughters of the Hua family. They all looked weak and frail, but they were unambiguous in handling things. However, in this way, he saved a lot of things. After careful calculation, it was still arrive at the main city earlier than scheduled. Young master of the Su family. Just when Susheoxi was about to step onto the carriage, Tianyu suddenly called him. I wonder if the young lady of the Ji family has anything else to say. To be honest, thinking about her cousin's miserable situation, Susheoxi was still a little worried when she saw Tianyu, for fear that she would experience the same fate as her cousin if she was not careful. Tianyu, accompanied by Jiyuz, walked over together. I just want to ask, how are the people in my family? Susheoxi. I am a businessman, not a messenger. Last time, the young master of the Su family's cousin left in such a hurry that she didn't even have time to say goodbye properly. When I return to the main city one day, I will take Tianyu to visit her in person, Jiyo said slowly. As soon as Susheoxi heard the word cousin, she couldn't help but tremble. Sure enough, Tianyu's eyes, which were originally smiling, were obviously filled with unknown fire. How can Su's cousin dare bother you two to visit her? Speaking of which, the Hua family has been doing well recently. I heard that Miss Mu Yan of the Hua family has a very stable relationship with the young master of the Zhou family after their engagement. There is no need to worry about the crown princess. When Susheoxi said this, he almost stared at Jiyuz. Don't think that he doesn't know. Jiyuz seems to be wasting his time here with Tianyu, but in fact he has already been under the prince's command. If Tianyu didn't have Jiyuz's help, he would never be able to live in such a stable life. Speaking of which, Jiyuz is a man. He didn't expect that he, a businessman, would be so embarrassed for his wife, and he wasn't afraid of being embarrassed if he spoke out. Jiyuz took in all Susheoxi's complaints and saw that the little wife beside him was listening with interest and smiling. Jiyuz also laughed along with him. The prince has already made arrangements. It is not convenient for him to show off too much before he ascends the throne, so there is nothing more important now than making his wife happy. Tianyu's temperament has always been straightforward. After hearing what happened at home, she had already forgotten about the so-called cousin and went to her grandma's house. She waited until she found out everything Susheoxi knew before she made a small gesture. He waved and let Susheoxi go. Poor Susheoxi's words were so thin. After the long journey back to the main city, he didn't even have time to rest. After transporting the medicinal materials to Qingnanzai overnight, he had to return to the Su family to continue making various arrangements. Mu Yan has also been preparing for it early. As soon as he received the medicinal materials, he started to prepare new products. He originally planned to launch the new product on August 15, but it was placed in Qingnanzai in just a few days. On the shelf, the most important thing is that the price is not the same as before. People who originally did not dare to have expectations for the new products of Qingnanzai simply blocked the door of Qingnanzai. They used to think that the new products of Qingnanzai were expensive, but now in the face of rising prices, Qingnanzai, how can Nangzai's new products be considered expensive? As the people were looting frantically, the merchants in the main city gradually turned their attention to Qingnanzai. Especially those shopkeepers who rent Huajia shop, all of them come to the door in person, just to ask the reason why Qingnanzai does not increase the price. Mu Yan thought about her third sister's explanation, but she didn't hide anything. She directly said that these medicinal materials were purchased by the Su family from medicinal merchants in other cities. Since they were not linked to the merchant alliance in the main city, the price was naturally cheap. Nowadays, due to the rising prices in the main city, all the merchants have lost their guests. Now that they heard the news, they immediately blocked the door of the Su family, trying to sign an agreement with the Su family to transport medicinal materials from other cities. Susheoxi had been prepared for a long time. No matter how many merchants there were, he did not panic. After signing the agreements one by one, he immediately dispatched a fleet of vehicles that had been prepared for a long time. After the first batch of medicinal materials was delivered back to the main city, many people the medicine shop naturally returned to its original price. As a result, other medicinal material shops naturally found the Su family one after another. After Fan Kinjao heard the news, he simply made an appointment with Su Shaoxi again and wanted Su Shaoxi to organize a new business alliance. In order to completely eradicate the dirty tricks behind the Liao family, it is necessary to allow the merchants in the main city to establish their own businesses. Of course, it is not only King Nanzai who will benefit from this. Su Shaoxi has always wanted to make a name for himself in the main city instead of relying on the Su family. His eyes lit up when he heard Fan Kinjao's proposal. Dry. Why not? Now is the time when merchants are having disputes with the old business alliance. Once the new business alliance is established at this time, as long as it can provide sufficient benefits and protection to the merchants, which merchant will not be eager to join? Su Shaoxi did what he said and immediately established a new business alliance in the main city, led by the Su family and King Nanzai. Nowadays, there are many medicinal shops that buy and sell medicinal materials from the Su family. I heard that as long as you join the merchant alliance, not only will you be able to manage all the medicinal materials in the future, the Su family can also help other merchants in the main city to find other cities. Various as for the purchasing channels, everyone is rushing to join. As the large number of medicinal herb shops in the main city gradually stabilized their prices, more and more merchants joined the new merchant alliance. Naturally, the merchants who were still fighting with the old merchant alliance couldn't sit still. In the past, when prices increased, everyone would increase their prices together and make no money together. But now that someone has lowered their prices, wouldn't those of them who are still increasing their prices have to watch others crowded while their own homes are deserted? The merchants had no way to vent their grievances, so they naturally turned their hatred towards the merchant alliance. I don't know since when, merchants from the main city began to gather in large numbers outside the door of the merchant alliance, all clamoring for the merchant alliance to lower their prices. It was just like this that the people realized that everything was the merchant alliance's idea, and they were angry. However, the common people naturally joined the protest army. These elders of the merchant alliance have been admired by others all their lives. Now they are buried up to their necks in loess, but they live a life of being scolded by the people all day long. How can they bear it? As the elders of the merchant alliance fell ill one after another, the Liao family, as the chief culprit, naturally couldn't sit still. But the anger in the main city has reached its limit. Even if the Liao family actively proposes to reduce the membership fees at this time, it will not calm the anger of the people and merchants. Now when the old man of the Liao family wants to go out, he has to take off the Liao family's sign on the carriage. As for the other members of the Liao family, they have also become street rats. Even Liao Yue, who is in the second prince's mansion, now they all have to keep their heads down and behave. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 873. Chapter 873, Sick of Anger. The second prince originally felt that Liao Yue was too strong, but since his adopted concubine couldn't say much, he finally caught the Liao family's tail and went to the second prince's concubine's yard that night. Your Highness, Aunt Liao said she is not feeling well and would like you to come over and take a look. In the middle of the night, the maid from Liao Yue courtyard stood at the door and kept knocking on the door. The second princess had no choice but to get up, put on her clothes, walked out of the door and said, took her sign and handed it to the maid, Your Highness went to bed early, Please quickly go outside and ask a doctor to come back and show it to Aunt Liao. Look. The maid looked at the sign in her hand. It didn't matter whether she left or not. The second princess frowned. Why, do you want to make Aunt Liao's condition worse? As a maid, she naturally didn't dare to bear the burden, so she hurriedly walked out of the yard with the sign. In the room, the second prince, who was not sleepy, did not expect that because of his indecisiveness, even his servants dared to disobey the second prince and his concubine. Just seeing the second prince's concubine enter the door, the second prince said helplessly, I've made you feel wronged. Aunt Liao has such a flamboyant temper. You just need to be more patient with her. I am the concubine and should not worry your highness. It is all my concubine's fault. Hearing these words, the second prince's face looked filled with gratitude, but her heart felt cold. In the final analysis, the temper of the second prince is still too weak. One side is the mother concubine and the other is the adopted concubine. It is difficult to distinguish which is heavier and which is lighter. But can't you still tell who is referring to Minglu? It's just that the second prince and concubine cannot say this at will. The second prince's concubine was troubled, but Liao Yue was not much better. If it weren't for the second prince's acquiescence, how could the second prince's concubine dare to drive her maid away on her own initiative? In the final analysis, it wasn't because the Liao family's affairs implicated her. Since she married into the second prince's palace, Liao Yue has always been in favor of the second prince's concubine, but now she is being crushed over her head by the second prince's concubine. How can she swallow this sigh of relief? That night, Liao Yue sent a letter to the Liao family. The next day, news came out that the old man of the Liao family was ill. Apparently very angry. Of course Fan Qinjiao knew that everything was the fault of the Liao family. If he wanted to wield a sword for concubine Yu, he had to be prepared to be knocked to the ground. But Fan Qinjiao overlooked one point. Sun Kentong married a branch of the Liao family. When he thought of this, Fan Qinjiao quickly asked Ninghan to run away, for fear that the matter would involve Sun Kentong. Ninghan came back very quickly and said with a smile as soon as she entered the door, Don't worry, young lady, Miss Sun's family said that the branch of the Liao family she married has not been with the old man of the Liao family for a long time, and she made it clear when the family was separated. Everyone should live their own lives, but now that something happened to the old lady of the Liao family, it's too late for her husband's family to be happy, so there's no way they would bother her. Fan Qinjiao breathed a sigh of relief. It was a good thing that Sun Kentong would not be implicated. Ninghan couldn't help but sigh. Speaking of which, the old man of the Liao family is also a famous figure in our main city. I heard from the Miss Sun family that when the family was separated, the old man of the Liao family almost let him alone. The branch of the Liao family left home, but unexpectedly, he fell ill now. The more reputable a person is, the more he can't afford to be embarrassed. He has always lived a respectful life. Now, even if he is criticized by the people in the main city, he also has to be complained by his granddaughter in a letter. The Liao families, no matter how hard-hearted that old man is, I'm afraid he won't be able to bear it, Fan Qinjiao said calmly, not feeling any sympathy at all. The road is chosen by oneself. Not to mention falling ill, even if one dies, one has to carry it by oneself. The master and servant were talking, and even the curtain at the door was lifted. Ninghan thought she was Nanny Su and was about to ask if something was wrong. But when she saw the person coming, she froze on the spot and said, Your Majesty, Your Highness. Fan Qinjiao looked at Bailey Fengming who came in and was stunned. How come you have time to come? Bailey Fengming was wearing a familiar white robe with a tall green bamboo embroidered with silver silk thread. Facing Fan Qinjiao's question, he smiled faintly and said, It's rare that there is nothing important today, so my father told me to come and see you. Sure enough, the emperor was still wary of the Hua family. Since Bailey Fengming returned to the city, he and Fan Qinjiao have met quietly in private. To others, Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming have never met. The emperor sent Bailey Fengming here at this time. There is nothing wrong with visiting Fan Qinjiao. The Hua family knew in their hearts the purpose of the emperor's appointment of Bailey Fengming to visit Fan Qinjiao. In addition, Bailey Fengming and Fan Qinjiao were already openly engaged. The Hua family not only did not stop Bailey Fengming, but actually send the person directly into the backyard. Fan Qinjiao looked at Bailey Fengming and said, "Since you're here, let's stay and have dinner before leaving." Bailey Fengming smiled and nodded, "Okay." When Nanny Su heard that His Highness the Crown Prince was going to stay for dinner, she was so happy that she went to the main kitchen in person and ordered a lot of dishes with a list of flavors. She even watched the people in the big kitchen cooking them one by one. "I'm afraid there's something wrong somewhere." The daughters-in-law of each house looked at this situation and quickly asked people around them to go out and buy special dishes from each restaurant. It was rare for the prince to come to eat at home, so he couldn't be too monotonous. After a lot of trouble from the people in the house, when the food was put on the table, even Fan Qinjiao was shocked. The round table, which was not big or small, was densely filled with all kinds of meat and vegetarian food. Even the Chinese New Year is not so rich. Ning Han held a big jar and walked in the door. "Miss, the master said this is an old wine. I got it from Prince Heshuo some time ago. I haven't been willing to drink it, so I gave it to the prince. Your Highness added to the fun." When Aunt Su heard this, she smiled and rolled her eyes. The more people in the palace valued the prince, the more they made good friends with their little lady. After the little lady got married, His Highness the Prince would be considering the good things of the Hua family. He didn't dare to treat the young lady too badly. How could Fan Qinjiao not see the good intentions of the elders in the house? But if he really drank such a large jar of wine, he would probably be drunk until next year. But before Fan Qinjiao could politely refuse, Bailey Fengming said, "It just so happens that Xiaoxian and Lin Yi are both greedy for wine recently, but they are really picky, and now it happens that they can borrow flowers to offer to the Buddha." Bailey Fengming's words not only digested the whole jar of wine, but also established a good relationship with Hua Yaoding, Xiaoxian, and Lin Yi. Even if the relationship between the Hua family and Bailey Fengming is not normal now, with the character of my grandfather, even if the sky falls, he will never open his mouth to the people around Bailey Fengming. As for Xiaoxian and Lin Yi, they may have some respect for their grandfather, but after all, they are people close to the prince. To put it bluntly, there is always a ditch that cannot be crossed between each other. But once they drank a jar of wine, if Lin Yi and Xiaoxian really saw something happen to their grandfather in the future, they would not stand idly by. As the saying goes, eating people has a short mouth. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 874. Chapter 874. The Liao family comes to the door. Things in the palace are changing rapidly, and no one can say that there will be no surprises at all. I think Bailey Fengming made such an arrangement after hearing that his grandfather was felt sorry for by the people in front of the emperor. It was rare for Bailey Fengming to see Fan Qinjiao lose his mind, so he simply didn't disturb her and just sat aside drinking tea, thinking all over the place with her. By the time Fan Qinjiao came to his senses, everyone in the room had already left. Even Bailey Fengming had finished 2 cups of tea in his hand. "I'm sorry for your trouble," Fan Qinjiao said softly. "Your family is also mine, and it's worth the trouble." Bailey Fengming picked up the chopsticks first and placed the Buddha's hand in front of Fan Qinjiao's bowl. "I've eaten the Buddha's hand from this restaurant before. It tastes good. Try it." Fan Qinjiao looked at the Buddha's hand in the bowl and was in a trance for a moment. If she remembered correctly, it seemed that she had never mentioned in front of Bailey Fengming that she liked eating Buddha's hand. How did he know? In the last life, Fan Qinjiao really loved the taste of bergamot. She still remembered that she was so unreasonable that she asked people around her to buy bergamot for her to eat all day long. Later, when Bailey Rongs learned about this, he went out of his way to eat it every day. Someone was sent to find a restaurant for her during the whole trip, and she was given bergamot to eat every time. At that time, Fan Kinjao ridiculously thought that it was pampering. Think about it now, it's just a brainwashing method by Bailey Wrongs. What? Bailey Fengming asked softly when he saw that Fan Kinjao hadn't moved his chopsticks for a long time. Fan Kinjao came back to his senses, looked at Bailey Fengming's eyes that seemed to hide thousands of stars, smiled and shook his head. It's okay, I just thought of something I shouldn't have thought of. Bailey Fengming smiled faintly and did not ask what was going on. Seeing that Fan Kinjao finally picked up the chopsticks, he followed her to eat the food. Fan Kinjao rarely saw that Bailey Fengming had such a good appetite, so he asked curiously, I didn't see you using chopsticks at the banquet before. I had some problems in the past. I would get sick after eating something too greasy. Bailey Fengming paused the chopsticks in his hand because he wanted to speak. Even if it was just a simple action, it revealed a good education and an unstoppable attitude. Royal courtesy. But his actions were in stark contrast to his words. Stomach problems are accumulated over many years. Bailey Fengming is only old now, so it is conceivable that his diseases should have been left in his childhood. Although Bailey Fengming did not elaborate, Fan Kinjao could not understand that an unpopular prince, even if he lives in the East Palace and holds the title of prince, his life may not be easy, and concubine Yu as he was counting on his son to reach the top, so he regarded Bailey Fengming as a thorn in his side. You need to take care of your stomach problems. I'll help you take care of it after you get married, Fan Kinjao was thinking in his mind. It would be a bit unreliable to let Bailey Fengming run to Hua's house 3 times a day. Okay, Bailey Fengming looked at Fan Kinjao and smiled lightly, but the deep dimples at the corners of his mouth had not disappeared for a long time. Fan Kinjao. Speak as you say and smile so ambiguously. What are you doing? The meal was eaten leisurely. After the meal, Fan Kinjao was afraid that Bailey Fengming's stomach would not be able to bear too much food, so he specially prepared a simple medicine and asked Ningguan to drink it with tea. Brew. Bailey Fengming thought that he had finally gotten some clues about what he had sent to investigate during this period, so he thought about telling Fan Kinjao while drinking tea. After all, he had never thought of hiding it from her. But before Ningguan came back from delivering tea, the yard was noisy. Fan Kinjao looked at Ningguan who came in with a tray and asked, what happened? Ningguan's expression was also ugly. I really didn't expect that the Liao family could do such a shameless thing. They rushed into the backyard in broad daylight and said that it was a matter of life and death that they needed to discuss with the young lady. From Yi Nunu's point of view, she was just bullying Fan. Brother is so fooled. Speaking of this matter, Fan Zhao really did not dare to stop him. Now everyone in the main city knows that the second prince has a concubine who is a member of the Liao family. In addition, the Liao family has been talking about the sky falling and waiting for the princess to save her life. Fan Zhao is a bandit, how can he understand these rich people? He was twisting and turning, for fear of delaying his lady's important event, so he let the person in. Fan Kinjao naturally knew the reason why the Liao family came to the door, but since they were here, wouldn't it seem like she was in the wrong if she didn't see them? Ningguan saw that the young lady had no intention of refusing, so she asked, do you need a slave to take me to the flower hall? Fan Kinjao shook his head, no need, just let them in. She doesn't have time to prepare anything for someone who doesn't deserve it. Ningguan nodded and hurriedly turned around and walked out the door. The people standing at the entrance of the yard this time are the eldest and second uncles of the Liao family. To say that these two are considered to be prominent figures in the main city, even if they come to ask for something, they are still very impressive, especially after hearing that when Ninghan asked them to come in, the two of them looked as if they should take it for granted. What kind of princess is she? She is just a woman with long hair and short knowledge. Women are just chaff, worthless, and they are all dependent on men. It is just that the granddaughter of the Hua family has a good life and has become a piece of clothing around the prince. Brother, as soon as we meet, let's give this little girl who doesn't know the world a lesson first, the second master of the Liao family suggested in a low voice. The uncle of the Liao family smiled coldly. There is no need to avoid anything. Even if she is a princess, how can she really cover the sky with one hand in the main city? Don't forget, our Liao family is the leader of the business alliance in the main city. With her, how dare a little girl be so arrogant in front of us? King Nanzai is indeed managed by Mu Yan now, but the heads of the two Liao family members are not in vain. The reason why the Liao family raised prices was to prevent Fan Qinjiao from treating the people in Dongxiang. Although the Su family is currently promoting a business alliance with King Nanzai, how come the Liao family doesn't know that the person behind it is actually the crown princess? So they must come to the crown princess to talk about this matter today. Thinking like this, the eldest and second masters of the Liao family walked in the door with their heads held high, but they didn't expect that they didn't have time to say a word after entering the house. No matter how they looked at it, they felt that they were leaning against each other at this moment. Why does the man reading on the Arhat's bed look so familiar? Think about it carefully. Take a closer look again. The legs of Mr. Liao and Mr. Liao felt a little weak. Your Majesty, Your Highness the Crown Prince? Bailey Fengming seemed not to notice the two dumbfounded people at the door, and concentrated on the book in his hand. In the quiet room, the only sound left was the sound of reading books from time to time. It was Fan Qinjiao who was sitting next to Bailey Fengming. He subconsciously looked towards the door. When he saw the two people standing at the door, he smiled and said, "Are you two guests of the Liao family?" End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 875. Chapter 875. It was clearly intentional. What else could the two people whose names were called do? They could only bravely walk over, bend down their straight old waists, and respectfully salute and say, "Hello, common people, please give your regards to His Highness the Crown Prince, and please give your regards to the Crown Princess." Bailey Fengming continued to read the scroll, as if he didn't hear it at all. The elder and second elders of the Liao family were lying on the ground, their knees hurting. After a while, their arms and legs began to tremble. Fan Qinjiao silently looked at the embarrassed appearance of the two Liao family members, and after a long while, he handed the teacup beside him to Bailey Fengming. "The weather is a bit dry, and His Highness the Crown Prince needs to drink more tea to moisten his throat." Bailey Fengming looked up from the book, and then suddenly came back to his senses and became more immersed in reading. The eldest and second masters of the Liao family. It's obviously intentional. But they only dare to think about it in their hearts, and they dare not say it directly even if they are beaten to death. No matter how His Royal Highness the Prince does not receive the Emperor's attention in the palace, it is still a royal family matter. How can outsiders like them be allowed to comment? Bailey Fengming waited until he finished drinking a cup of tea before he said calmly, "Let's get up." The eldest and second masters of the Liao family stood up as if they had received an amnesty. Their legs were still shaking badly. They just wanted to find a stool to sit on, but the prince only asked them to stand up, but did not let them sit down. Of course, Fan Qinjiao would not take the initiative to ask people to move stools for them. He just looked at the two of them and said, "I wonder why the two gentlemen came into my backyard in broad daylight." The two people who originally raised an army to question the crime are now staring at each other with big eyes and small eyes. No one knows what to say. They had just entered the door when His Highness the Crown Prince came and showed off his power. Now they were so cautious that they didn't even know where to put their hands and feet. How could they have the courage to accuse the Crown Prince's woman? The two gentlemen are so tired that they can't even speak. "It's all my negligence. Come here, please bring chairs to the two gentlemen quickly." Fan Qinjiao looked out the door and ordered. The chairs were brought in, but the two gentlemen of the Liao family didn't dare to put their butts on them. Even though Fan Kinjao kept saying that he was negligent, it was His Highness the Crown Prince who was not allowed to sit down. If they really sat on him, wouldn't they have made it clear that they had objections to the Crown Prince? Seeing that the chair placed in front of them could not be sat on, the two gentlemen of the Liao family could not explain how they felt. "Why don't you two sit down, but you're not tired?" Two gentlemen of the Liao family. They felt that Fan Kinjao was deliberately embarrassing them, but Fan Kinjao had such an innocent look on his face that they couldn't find any evidence even if they wanted to doubt him. "The two of us are visiting today. We really have something important to discuss with the Crown Princess. The Liao family now just wants to make a quick decision and then go home and sit on a chair." Fan Kinjao nodded, as if he was all ears. "I think the Crown Princess knows something about the recent commotion in the main city, right? I wonder what the Liao family is talking about." Uncle of the Liao family. "I really want to hit someone, but I can't." Faced with Fan Kinjao's doubts, the Liao family, who originally wanted to make a quick decision, could only tell what happened in the main city. Of course, the Liao family would naturally insist on the reason why the Merchant Alliance increased its price. Just to prepare for the unexpected needs of the army. Listening to these high-sounding words, Fan Kinjao sneered in his heart, but said without any expression on his face, "It's naturally good for the Merchant Alliance to have such thoughts of dedicating themselves to the court. I didn't expect that the Liao family, as businessmen, would be so good." His sincere and patriotic heart is indeed worthy of praise from everyone. After hearing this, the second master of the Liao family looked at his eldest brother. He was indeed a man with long hair and short knowledge. He could only follow their words. "Let's go on." Listening to these words, the Liao family uncle raised his chin slightly. "It's a good thing that the Crown Princess can understand, but what I'm afraid the Crown Princess doesn't know is that King Nanzai has jointly established a new restaurant in the main city with the Su family. As far as I know, there are not a few people joining the business alliance." Fan Kinjao nodded. "So what Mr. Liao means is," the uncle of the Liao family said, "since the Crown Princess understands that our Liao family is here to prepare for a rainy day for the court, he should persuade his sister and the Su family to cancel the establishment of the new business alliance. Otherwise, if all the merchants in the main city go to the new alliance, even if the Liao family is willing, they may never be able to serve the court again. This hat is a bit too big." The second master of the Liao family followed up and said, "Although it is a peaceful and prosperous age, no one can guarantee that there will never be another war. The Crown Princess also knows that the Hua family has long since declined. Once a war does break out, if the court can no longer provide money, what should the people do? What should Ziliang do? They are indeed brothers, and the only thing they open and close is to hold the pot up one after another. To put it bluntly, if Fan Kinjao does not agree to revoke the new alliance, he will be the sinner of Ziliang." Under the eager gazes of the two masters of the Liao family, Fan Kinjao sighed quietly. "I didn't expect the matter to be so serious. In this case." Hearing this, the two gentlemen of the Liao family felt very happy. Chao Chang is Chao Chang, and he will be thrown into disarray as long as he is frightened. The prince was originally weak and incompetent, and now that he married such a lackadaisical person, there was nothing he could do to fight with the third prince. As long as the Liao family hugged the third prince tightly, the main city would belong to the Liao family from now on. According to my opinion, it has nothing to do with the new merchant alliance." Fan Kinjao's sudden words were like a blow to the head, causing the ears of the two masters of the Liao family to ring. The two of them looked at me and I looked at you, seriously doubting whether they heard something wrong. It seems that the Crown Princess still doesn't understand the seriousness of the situation. The uncle of the Liao family wanted to say something more, but was interrupted by Fan Kinjao. "The Liao family's thoughts on the court are indeed beyond the reach of others. But just because of this, the membership fees were increased out of thin air. The Liao family had followed up in advance are the merchants below discussing this. The second master of the Liao family frowned. Why discuss the decision of the business alliance with the merchants below? Since they have decided to join our business alliance, they must act in accordance with our rules. So, all the merchants who join the Liao family business alliance are voluntary. That's natural. The second master of the Liao family looked proud. That being the case, why does the Liao family prevent the establishment of the new Chamber of Commerce? It is voluntary for merchants to join the Chamber of Commerce. If more people join, the new Chamber of Commerce will naturally be established. It is just a matter of mutual consent. Why can it be done with the Liao family, but not with other people? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 876. Chapter 876. You have to pay a price for embarrassing my wife. Facing the questions raised by Fan Kinjao, the second master of the Liao family could not answer them. Uncle Liao quickly said, "We have made it clear just now that the Merchant Association's price increase is for the court's precaution. Now that the new Merchant Alliance has been established, if all the merchants go there, where will our Chamber of Commerce go to collect membership fees? In this way, come on, even if we want to help the imperial court, there is nothing we can do." Fan Kinjao laughed after hearing this. How capable I am of the Liao family, but it turns out it's just that. The uncle of the Liao family was immediately filled with anger and blood. What does the crown princess mean by these words? You can do as much work as you have the ability. Even a 3-year-old baby can understand such a simple truth. How come the Liao family doesn't understand it? Since the Liao family wants to share the worries of the court, then they should show sincerity from themselves, and it's not about taking advantage of merchants' money to make profits for themselves. The uncle of the Liao family gasped in anger. Why should the crown princess misinterpret our Liao family's good intentions for serving the country? Fan Kinjao smiled coldly. Not to mention that Ziliang is peaceful now. Even if the court really needed money, how much money the Liao family donated to the court, in the end it was only the Liao family that benefited, not the merchants of the Merchant Alliance. Or can the Liao family guarantee that on that day, the Liao family will report the names of all merchants to the court? Our Liao family has always been above board in doing things. Why don't we dare? The second master of the Liao family said confidently. No one knows when the court will need money. Even if it does come one day, war will start. Is it possible that the crown princess still needs money? If you want to bring up old matters with the Liao family, you can't. In this case, please ask the Liao family to set up a donation book in the Merchant Alliance, and also inform everyone of the court's thoughts. I think as long as it involves national affairs, whether it is the people of the main city or the merchants of the main city, they will all be obliged to do so. Fan Kinjao's move was too cruel. The name of the person who took the money was directly recorded in the record. When the court really needed the money and the name list were handed over, it would be clear at a glance who had taken the money to the court. But is the Liao family really doing this to collect money for the imperial court? Of course not. They just want to find a reason to raise prices in the main city to prevent Fan Kinjao from continuing to refine medicine to treat the people in Dongxiang. Don't say that the Liao family won't do thankless things. Even if the Liao family really goes out of their way to do it, wouldn't the imperial court be shameless? Now that the country is peaceful and the people are safe, the Liao family will help the imperial court raise funds in a big way. Isn't it a clear mockery of the Ministry of Household Affairs? No money? Who is in charge of the household department? Of course it's the emperor. After all, it was not the emperor's face that was beaten in the end. When things have developed to this point, The two masters of the Liao family have finally realized that the crown princess has blocked the road. Either agree to the establishment of the new business alliance, or raise funds, but the Liao family cannot defeat the emperor's face. If Long Fury is really angered, not all the heads of the Liao family can be chopped off. The two gentlemen of the Liao family froze on the spot, never dreaming that things would turn out this way. I wonder what the two gentlemen of the Liao family want to say. Fan Qinjiao still looked good-tempered. It was only then that the two gentlemen of the Liao family realized that despite the fact that the crown princess seemed innocent and good-natured, she was actually nothing more than a soft persimmon. She was nothing but a diamond with teeth. Hearing a word from the crown princess is worth 10 years of reading if I think about it carefully. It's true that the Liao family didn't do it well enough. It's disrespectful for ordinary people to disturb the crown princess a lot today. Even if the two gentlemen of the Liao family didn't want to bow their heads, they had no choice but to throw out soft words and wait until they returned to discuss the matter further. But just when the two gentlemen of the Liao family were about to sneak away with their tails between their legs, Bailey Fengming, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, "Wait a minute. Two gentlemen of the Liao family. They have all given up. What else do they want?" Bailey Fengming seemed to have thought of something, put down the book in his hand and said, "After I returned to the city this time, I heard that the people in Dongxiang were living a very miserable life, and even their illnesses could not be cured, so I told my father the truth about this matter." Report: after learning about it, my father was considerate of the people, so he wanted to hand over the matter to the main city medical hospital to help share the burden. Since the Liao family has such a sincere heart, he is the perfect candidate. Bailey Fengming's words directly nailed the two masters of the Liao family to death. "Didn't your Liao family embarrass my daughter-in-law under the guise of sharing the worries of the court? Now the time has come when we need you. If the Liao family can really do this thing beautifully this time, it can be considered a waste." Fan Qinjiao also trembled slightly in his heart. Unexpectedly, Bailey Fengming had already ventilated the air on the emperor's side. No matter what method Bailey Fengming used, the emperor clearly agreed to treat the people in Dongxiang. The Liao family is a businessman, and since they are businessmen, they cannot afford to start early without profit. Now Bailey Fengming lets them put money into it without making any money, which is more uncomfortable for them than cutting flesh with a knife. Uncle Liao still wanted to struggle. The emperor's love for the people moved the common people. However, this matter is not trivial. The common people have to go back and discuss it carefully with their father. Bailey Fengming looked at the eldest master of the Liao family calmly. "Rescuing the people is like putting out a fire. You can't waste a moment. Besides, being able to serve the imperial court is a blessing you can only dream of." I also saw the sincerity of the eldest son of the Liao family just now. I just thought of leaving this matter to the Liao family. If the Liao family really feels that it is difficult for others to do so, it is better to just let it go. Hearing this, the two gentlemen of the Liao family felt a lump in their throats, but they couldn't say another word. The prince is obviously trying to catch up. The most helpless thing is that even if the Liao family knows that it is a loss-making transaction, no matter how reluctant they are, they still have to agree with a smile, otherwise they will really offend the court because of this matter. How can the family gain a foothold in the main city? "Your Highness, the prince, don't worry, the Liao family will do their best for this matter. It is the common people's job to share the worries of the imperial court." The two masters of the Liao family bravely agreed to the matter. They looked dedicated, but in fact their hearts were bleeding. Fan Qinjiao did not expect that things would turn out like this. After the two masters of the Liao family left, he looked at Bailey Fengming and asked, "When did you tell the emperor about Dongxiang?" "A few days ago, since my father gathered the people who had been rescued in the East Alley. He clearly regarded those people as shameless beings. In this case, as long as my father feels that these so-called shame can become a shameful thing, he is a weapon sought after by the people, so my father will naturally change his attitude. Bailey Fengming said calmly, but even his calm tone still made Fan Qingjiao's heart tremble. As long as the news is released that it was the emperor who ordered the rescue of the people in Dongxiang, the people all over the city will naturally shed tears of gratitude to the emperor. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 877. Chapter 877. The fifth prince wakes up. Fan Qingjiao knew very well that now that she was rescuing the people in Dongxiang, she would be criticized sooner or later. But in the face of those innocent lives, she just wanted to do it first and then talk about it. Unexpectedly, Bailey Fengming had been silent for a long time. The ground was cleared for her. As long as this matter alarmed the emperor, it turned from darkness to light. Even if Bailey Rongs wanted to use the court to get rid of those people, they had to be cautious. Actually, I can afford it even if I don't need the Liao family, Fan Qingjiao said softly. Now that Bailey Fengming has offended the Liao family because of her affairs, I'm afraid that this matter will soon spread to Bailey Rong. Over there. Since Bailey Rongs knew about it, Concubine Yu naturally knew about it too. With Concubine Yu's methods and calculations, she didn't know what tricks she was going to create to embarrass Bailey Fengming. Bailey Fengming smiled and touched the top of her soft hair. I can eat Madam's soft rice, but others can't. Fan Qingjiao. You are eating soft food, are you eating unreasonably? Since we are enemies, no matter what we do or not, we will not turn our hostility into friendship. After all, I have been dealing with Concubine Yu for more than 10 years, so don't worry. Bailey Fengming's slender fingers slid down towards Fan Qing. Yao's fair cheeks were slightly pinched. She had lost some weight, but her fat-like skin really made him fall in love with her. Fan Qingjiao looked at a certain fox who was still in the mood to take advantage of him, but he smiled and said nothing more. Bailey Fengming looked out the window, seeing that it was dark outside, and frowned silently. What? Fan Qingjiao asked. It's time for me to return to the palace. Bailey Fengming thought for a while, and finally suppressed what he originally wanted to say. This matter is a long story and cannot be explained clearly in 1 or 2 sentences. It would be better to choose a better one. It's not too late to tell her the time. Fan Qingjiao noticed that Bailey Fengming was hesitant to speak, but he didn't ask any more questions. He stood up and accompanied him out of the yard, heading towards the door of the house. I didn't expect that as soon as I stepped out of the door of the mansion, I saw Xiaoxian settling in front of me. Your Highness, Crown Princess, the fifth prince is awake. Fan Qingjiao knew that the fifth prince would definitely wake up, but he didn't expect it to be so soon. However, although he woke up, his body was still very weak. If he wanted to recover as before, he would have to cultivate carefully. When Fan Qingjiao came to her senses, she wanted to ask the nurse at the door to go back and get her medicine box. But before she could say anything, a slender beautiful hand appeared in front of her, carrying her medicine box. Inside. Immediately afterwards, Bailey Fengming and Fan Zhao were seen saying, I will take your young lady to the palace to sit for a while. There is no need to follow her. I will personally send her back later. After saying that, he pulled Fan Qingjiao and got into the carriage. As the carriage drove slowly towards the palace, Fan Qingjiao had always been in a somewhat confused state. He had long been accustomed to making decisions and arranging everything by himself, but now he suddenly became a man with clothes to wear, food to eat and mouth to open. My lord, it's strange that you can get used to it. Bailey Fengming could see her awkwardness at a glance. Being by my husband's side, if I still need my wife to do everything by myself, wouldn't it make me, as a husband, very incompetent? Fan Qingjiao raised his eyebrows. Didn't you say that you are a soft-boiled person? There was no trace of embarrassment on Bailey Fengming's handsome face. Instead, he nodded calmly. You always have to show some skills before you can eat soft rice openly. Fan Qingjiao. You'd better shut up. Bailey Fengming smiled softly and put his arms around Fan Qingjiao's thin shoulders. Get some sleep. I'll call you when I get there. Fan Qingjiao thought that it was indeed a long distance to walk from the western suburbs mansion to the palace, so he simply rested his head on Bailey Fengming's shoulder and closed his eyes. He originally wanted to close his eyes and rest for a while, but he didn't expect it to happen. He fell asleep, and when he opened his eyes again, the carriage had already stopped outside the palace gate. The weather in July was already slightly chilly at night. Bailey Fengming took out the shawl from the carriage and carefully put it on Fan Qingjiao's shoulders, then took her hand and got out of the carriage. The two of them walked all the way towards Fenji Palace. As soon as they entered the door, they saw the queen pacing back and forth in the side hall with a gloomy face, obviously very angry. Bai Li Lingyu was sitting on the bed. Her face still looked a little weak due to the lack of blood under the candlelight, but fortunately she still looked in good spirits. Faced with the queen's wrath, Bailey Lingyu kept persuading, "Empress, please be careful that your body is damaged by anger. You can't even get angry with those dogs. Those people don't do harm every day. You and them, after all these years of dealing with each other, why are we still not used to it? Your life was almost lost, how can I not be angry?" Queen Zhen 11 had a cold face and turned around in circles again angrily. Bailey Lingyu was worried to death. If he made his mother so angry, he might as well sleep a little longer. He happened to see Fan Qingjiao and Bailey Fengming coming in, and he quickly said, "Brother and sister-in-law, the emperor, you are finally here, hurry up and help me persuade the queen mother." Fan Qingjiao looked at the queen's face and made a guess in his mind. He walked over and supported the queen's arm and said softly, "No matter what the Fifth Highness has gone through, waking up is better than anything else. My daughter-in-law knows the Queen Mother has always treated the Fifth Highness as her own child, but even so, she still has to consider her own health. If anything happens to the Queen Mother, the Fifth Highness will also blame herself." After hearing this, Queen Zhengzi looked at the fifth prince on the bed. Bai Li Lingyu, who is very aware of current affairs, covered her chest for Junja and coughed hard several times. Cough. Empress Zhen 11 sighed. "Xiao Qingjiao said you were hurting your head, so you can pretend to be more like me." Bell Lingyu. Is it so difficult to be a patient now? Queen Zhen 11 also knew that her appearance would make the children worried, but she just couldn't swallow it. She turned around and sat on the soft couch, sighing heavily. "Concubine Yu was very cruel when she was young. Thinking that the third prince has not learned anything else, but has learned a lot about viciousness and cruelty, even daring to kill his brothers and sisters, what else can he not do?" After hearing this, Bailey Fengming looked at Bailey Lingyu and asked, "What's going on?" Bailey Lingyu thought for a while and said, "After the riot on the 15th, I led people to investigate the place where the accident occurred. Unexpectedly, I picked up the purse that Brother Sanhuang carried with him. Then Brother Sanhuang appeared at the scene without knowing when. Behind me, he knocked me unconscious while I was off guard." Bailey Fengming also knew about the trouble in the main city, but whether it was him or the queen, it was one thing to have suspicions, but it was another thing to really know who the murderer was. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 878. Chapter 878. The unfamiliar Bailey Fengming. The third prince took the opportunity to cause trouble, but he just wanted to throw dirty water. Unexpectedly, you picked up the purse by accident. I guess the third prince was panicked at that time, so he took action against you. Empress Zhen 11 frowned. Only then did Bailey Lingyu suddenly realize the reason why she was beaten. Although she hated Bailey wrongs in her heart, she was afraid that the queen would worry about her again, so she quickly smiled and said, "No matter what the third emperor brother's plan is, I will do it anyway. It's come alive." Fan Qingjiao said, "It doesn't seem to be a big deal now, but the toxins in the body may still remain. During this period, His Highness the Fifth Prince still needs to take good care of himself in Fenji Palace. Bailey Lingyu was stunned. Poison? What poison? Fan Kinjao had never thought of hiding Bailey Lingyu from him, so he told him about how Yunyu secretly poisoned Bailey Lingyu several times in an attempt to kill him after he was unconscious. Bell Lingyu. Bring him his big sword, he is going to fight Bailey wrongs. Bailey Fengming glanced over and asked, how did you persuade the queen just now? Can it be the same? Being killed once and being killed 100 times are completely different concepts. Now I really want to rush to Bailey wrongs and ask carefully how I got in his eyes. Oh, let him kill me again and again. Bailey Lingyu was really angry, even throwing away the superficial title. Fan Kinjao looked at Bailey Lingyu and said, not only can you not appear in front of the third prince, you have to continue to pretend to be sick. Bailey Lingyu was stunned. Why? Queen Zhen 11 understood what Fan Kinjao meant. The trouble in the main city has not been found out yet. To put it bluntly, both the third prince's side and ours are still in a stalemate over this matter. If you wake up at this time, even if you don't come forward to identify the third prince, I'm afraid the third prince's vicious methods will not tolerate you. Can't I just keep being a coward? Bailey Lingyu had really had enough of lying down. The most important thing was that he didn't know how Zhao Yi'er was doing recently, and he wanted to go and see her. Fan Kinjao knew what the fifth prince was thinking about, but now was really not the time to discuss Zhao Yi'er. Bailey Fengming could see Fan Kinjao's thoughts at a glance. He walked to the fifth prince and said softly, if you go out like this now, what will the people around you do? Brother, what do you mean? Think about it, brother. 3 emperors dares to kill you, so how can he care about the people around you? Bailey Fengming's words touched Bailey Lingyu's heart. Thinking of Zhao Yi'er who was helpless in the main city, Bailey Lingyu naturally couldn't bear to let anything happen to her. Seeing the fifth prince lying back on the bed obediently, Fan Kinjao didn't know what to say. Seeing that the fifth prince was a cheerful man, how could he be born with a love brain? The fifth prince's recovery naturally had to be concealed. Only in this way could concubine Yu take it lightly for the time being. Fortunately, she was now in Fenji Palace, and the queen was taking care of her internally and externally. She wanted to hide this matter. It's not a difficult task. Fan Kinjao saw that it was getting late, so he got up and left. Bailey Fengming accompanied her on the carriage leaving the palace. It was not until the carriage drove out of the palace that Fan Kinjao mentioned Zhao Yi'er. Zhao Yi'er is full of schemes and wants to climb up. If such a person really follows the fifth prince, he will probably cause trouble. Fan Kinjao could see that the fifth prince really liked Zhao Yi'er, but it was a pity that Zhao Yi'er was like that. The eyes of women contain nothing but power. It was precisely because of this that Fan Kinjao was so decisive in letting Zhao Yi'er suffer the consequences. But if the target is the fifth prince, Fan Kinjao really doesn't know how to explain it. Since you don't know how to explain it, just never explain it, Bailey Fengming said. Fan Kinjao was stunned. Should Zhao Yi'er disappear for no reason? Bailey Fengming nodded. It's not impossible. But if that's the case, wouldn't it be too cruel to the fifth prince? After all, for the fifth prince, Zhao Yi'er's unexplained disappearance will always leave a thought in his heart, and no one can estimate when this thought will be completely forgotten. Bailey Fengming said calmly, it is better to leave a thought than to leave a bad name. People always have to rely on something to survive. If you really have nothing, it will be the most difficult life that is worse than death. At this moment, the sound of Bailey Fengming was as deep as a bell ringing in a deep valley, empty and lonely, especially the pair of dark eyes had long lost their original starlight, and what was left was boundless distance and emptiness. Fan Kinjao has never seen such 100 miles of phoenixes. Lifeless, lifeless. Fan Kinjao didn't know what Bailey Fengming had experienced to show such an expression, but no matter what he had experienced, she didn't want him to continue to sink into it. Him like this made her feel inexplicably distressed and panicked. Sensing a slightly cold little hand slipping into his palm, Bailey Fengming suddenly came back to his senses. When he looked into Fan Kinjao's worried eyes, he smiled and stretched out his arms to hold her in his arms. I just thought of some things I shouldn't have thought about, but fortunately they are all over. Fan Kinjao rested his head on his steadily beating heart and said softly, now that it's over, don't think about it anymore. Bailey Fengming lowered his eyes slightly and kissed his smooth forehead. Okay. Your Highness, we have arrived. Lin Yi's voice sounded outside the carriage. Fan Kinjao propped up his body and originally wanted to get out of the carriage by himself. Unexpectedly, Bailey Fengming moved his body along with her, then took her hand and stepped out of the carriage with her. Go back and have a good sleep. Bailey Fengming raised his hand and tucked the scattered hair on her cheek behind her ear. Fan Kinjao nodded, you should go back too, otherwise the palace will have to issue the key. Bailey Fengming hummed before turning around and getting on the carriage. Fan Kinjao had been watching the news of Bailey Fengming's carriage in the night, and then she came back to her senses. Just as she turned around, she saw a horse stop. At this time, sitting in the carriage were Yin Lia and Cao Lishan, the young ladies of the Cao family. Yin Lia never expected that the Hua family could be so cruel and leave their mother and daughter alone in the restaurant. Yin Lia has always been proud and arrogant, and of course she will not bow her head, but this time she has a lot of money with her. After eating and drinking for so many days, she has no money in her pocket. She was kicked out of the restaurant today. Even if she didn't want to come to Hua's house, she had to come. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 879. Chapter 879. Stop outside the door and continue to dry. Yin Lia didn't know Fan Kinjao, but when she saw Fan Kinjao standing at the door of the western suburbs mansion, she knew that he must be a member of the Hua family, so she quickly asked the driver to go down and deliver the message. The boy walked up to Fan Kinjao and said, our eldest grandma is a distinguished guest of your Hua family. Even if your Hua family doesn't understand etiquette, our eldest grandma doesn't even bother to meet you. Now my eldest grandma is smiling with joy. Miss Shan came to the door on her own initiative. Why don't you, as a junior of the Hua family, come over to greet her? Fan Kinjao didn't recognize who this boy was at first, but when he heard the word Lishan, he knew it clearly. It turns out that her cousin is here. But if you really wanted to make peace, why did you wait until now to come? I was afraid that I didn't have enough money with me and I was desperate, so I thought of the Hua family again. I don't know any distinguished guests from the Hua family. Fan Kinjao looked at the young man and said. The boy was stunned and said, what are you talking about? In terms of seniority, our eldest grandma is your cousin. Fan Kinjao sneered, there are so many people who want to come to the Hua family to establish relationships. If everyone believes in the Hua family, wouldn't they be very busy every day? You. Fan Zhao. The subordinate is here. Drive these people away. If they are still stalking you at the door of Hua's house, report them directly to the official. If you want to enter the Hua family, you have to show the attitude of being a guest. After being left alone for so many days, you are still thinking about putting on airs. Who could spoil you? The boy watched helplessly as Fan Kinjao left just as he was about to leave. He stood there in confusion. Yin Lia in the carriage was not much better. She originally thought that as long as she asked the servant to reveal her identity, the junior members of the Hua family would respectfully ask her to get off the carriage, but what happened? Not to mention a carriage, if the stalemate continues, I'm afraid I won't even be able to get through the front door of Hua's house. Mom, let's go down and explain it to the Hua family. Cao Lishan pulled her mother's sleeve, her voice as low as a mosquito. Useless thing, "Look at this Junior, look at you, why are you such a waste?" Yin Lia shook off the hand hanging on her sleeve angrily. But having said that, seeing Fan Zhao and the guards surrounding the carriage, Yin Lia had no choice but to hold up her skirt and step out of the carriage, no matter how much she wanted to put on airs. Fan Zhao could tell that the young lady wanted to embarrass the people on the carriage. In fact, he did not like the arrogant Cao family, but now that Yin Lia had revealed her identity, even if Fan Zhao was worried about the old lady, we can't really send people to the government, so we still have people go to the government to report the news. Soon, the lights came on in the main courtyard of the Hua family. As the servants in the main courtyard began to get busy, it wasn't long before the entire Hua family knew that Yin Lia had come to visit with Cao Lishan. It's almost time for children, and there are really no rules for visiting guests at this time. However, even if the daughters-in-law in each house complain, they still have to get up and dress up, and go to the main courtyard to receive the guests together. After a while, Yin Lia walked into the mansion with Cao Lishan. She originally thought that the Hua family was in decline and the place they lived in would not be much better. Unexpectedly, after entering the door, she realized that there was actually something inside the seemingly small mansion. The rockery inside is rugged, the small bridges and flowing water are elegant and unique, and even the veranda leading to the backyard is built with carved railings. Cao Lishan looked at the scenery inside the mansion curiously, and couldn't help but said softly, "This mansion is well built. Although it is not as magnificent as ours, it is still very elegant." Of course Yin Lia would not admit it. Even when she saw the place where the Hua family lived, she fell in love with it. She glared at her daughter and said, "Look at your worthless look. No matter how good the place you live is, it is just an empty shell. How can it be compared with our government?" Cao Lishan was so punished that she shut her mouth and did not even dare to raise her head again. And he, who was leading the way in front, really couldn't stand listening anymore, but her identity was not good enough to argue with her cousin in person, so she could only speed up her pace and lead people to the main courtyard. Finally, when they arrived at the main courtyard, Grandma handed the man over to the maid in the yard, and then turned around to send a message to the young lady outside. Fan Qinjiao was leaning on the soft couch and reading a book when he heard Jian Tung's voice. Ning'an lifted the curtain and invited Aunt He to come in, but she complained quite loudly, "How could anyone come to visit us in the middle of the night? Isn't it true that the Cao family is also a wealthy family in Lingchang? This kind of behavior cannot be complimented." "Grandma," he sighed, "it's precisely because I was in that environment that I got used to going my own way." Fan Qinjiao could hear that what Aunt He said was clearly saying that the Cao family relied on their own wealth and did not take anyone seriously. In fact, there was no need for Aunt He to say it. It was done by the cousin. You can see from things how the Cao family behaves. However, Fan Qinjiao also knew that since someone came to the door, if she did not come forward, although the Cao family had nothing to do, it would still be a slap in the face of her grandmother. She simply cleaned up and followed Aunt He out. While walking on the road, Aunt He said softly, "Our cousin was not easy to get along with when she was young. She has a very high vision. I think when she came to the house as a guest, the eldest grandma was also a lot. If Miss Wei can't bear to suffer a loss at her hands, just ignore her." Fan Qinjiao naturally knows what kind of temper the eldest aunt is like. Although she is not very scheming, she has a temper that will not suffer any losses. She can make her eldest aunt suffer losses one after another. This cousin aunt does have some abilities. Fan Qinjiao knew that Aunt He was also afraid that he would suffer a loss in a head-on confrontation with his cousin, so he smiled and said, "I have written down what Aunt He said." And he nodded and said, "Speaking of which, Grandma Biao won't be able to live here for long. I've already inquired about it in advance. The date set by the family who said we were going to get married is the day after tomorrow. When we say we're getting married, cousin will be here for a long time. Naturally, Grandma will take Miss Lishan Biao back to prepare. In her last life, Fan Kinjao had always lived in the Fan mansion and had very little contact with the Hua family. It was precisely because of this that her grandfather felt that he had always been indebted to her, and later he helped her do those evil things. At that time, under the brainwashing of the Fan family, Fan Kinjao only felt that the Hua family should pay for it, so how could he care about the trivial matters of the Hua family? But now think about it, after the Hua family was defeated, the Cao family was the first to stand up and beat up the drowned dog. In order to show that they were incompatible with the Hua family, they fabricated many lies out of thin air and were forced by the Hua family, so that the mausoleum the people in the city heard what they heard and believed it to be true. Later, in order to show their determination to break with the Hua family, the Cao family spent money and effort to carve the names of their grandfather and uncles on the ground of the mausoleum, and they were trampled by the people of the city all day long. Fan Kinjao heard what Fan Swinning said when she was dying, but at that time she was confused and could no longer tell what was true and what was false. Looking at the behavior of the Cao family now, it is not surprising that they could do such a thing in the previous life. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 880. Chapter 880. Isn't it just about fighting each other? The main courtyard was bustling with activity. Fan Kinjao stepped into the threshold and saw that all the aunties were there. Muyan had obviously not woken up or had been dragged up. Now he was leaning on the fourth aunt's shoulder and was still confused. With Fan Kinjao's arrival, the originally gloomy-looking daughters-in-law showed a little smile and took the initiative to talk to Fan Kinjao. Even Muyan opened her eyes. Seeing this, Tao Yuxian also smiled and said, "Xiao Kinjao, come here to meet your cousin and cousin Lishan." Fan Kinjao followed the sound and saw a middle-aged woman sitting next to her grandmother. She looked a little older than her aunt who was once in the house. She was dressed in brocade and red floral material. She wore thumb-sized pearl earrings on her ears, and the gold bracelet on her wrist looked heavy just by looking at it. With such a nouveau riche-like dress, coupled with the high eyebrows, and sharp and critical eyes, it is true that just by looking at him, he is not easy to talk to. As soon as Yin Lia saw Fan Kinjao, she recognized that this was the person who had just blocked her out. She immediately raised her eyes and looked Fan Kinjao up and down with her eyebrows raised. Although Fan Kinjao had no intention of getting along with this cousin, his grandmother still had to say hello. "Kinjao has met my cousin." Yin Lia frowned, looked at Tao Yuxian beside her and asked, "How come I didn't know there was such a sister in my house?" Tao Yuxian smiled and said, "This is my maternal daughter. She came back with her later. Now that my daughter has remarried, Xiao Kinjao has stayed with me." Yin Lia nodded suddenly, looked at Fan Kinjao and said, "That's normal. After all, no second married woman is willing to bring a loser. Speaking of which, you are also pitiful." That's what he said, but his tone didn't mean the slightest bit of sympathy. Fan Kinjao knew that she would never get along well with her cousin if she blocked the door, but he didn't expect that this woman would not hide her malice and dare to say anything in front of her grandmother. "Explain." In this case, there is no need for Fan Kinjao to tolerate anything. It turns out that my mother really didn't want to remarry at the beginning, but she didn't want Governor's son to be passionately devoted to my mother. Fortunately, my mother is now Mrs. Jaoming, and she can be regarded as a member of the imperial family with Governor Sunday, a well-matched couple. Isn't it just fighting each other? Come. Can anyone who is in the lower court be given an imperial edict? Yin Lia couldn't help but shout out. Tao Yuxian frowned. It is indeed the emperor's personal decree. No one dares to play with this matter. Yin Lia seemed to notice Tao Yuxian's unhappy expression, and she quickly smiled and said, "Auntie said yes, I was just sighing with emotion. I used to hear people talking about Mrs. Jaoming, But I never thought that the real Mrsjoming was from my family. Inside the mansion. In Ziliang, women are inherently inferior to men. After getting married, who can say that they will not be ignored by their husband's family, but it is different when they are given a royal title. That is an honor that every woman dreams of getting in her life. In the early years, Yinlia had many connections to spend money on. She just wanted to find a job for herself, but she didn't expect that she spent a lot of money. In the end, it was just a bamboo basket to fetch water. Originally, she was laughing at Hua Yuelian, who was just a concubine who was kicked out of her husband's house. However, what she had always dreamed of fell into Hua Yuelian's hands. How could Yinlia not be jealous? They are all going to die of jealousy. The daughters-in-law of each house have long been dissatisfied with Yinlia's behavior. Now looking at Yinlia's stiff smile at the corners of her lips, she feels happy in her heart. Yinlia knew that she was being laughed at. She looked at Fan Qingjao with a dark face and said, "I heard that your mother gave birth to another child. Although it is also a daughter, she is still the biological flesh and blood of the Sun family. It is also a pain for you. I lost my father at a young age, and now my mother is missing." Fan Qingjao smiled faintly and said calmly, "My marriage has been decided. When I get married, I won't be able to trouble my mother's family often, so I won't bother my cousin to worry about it. But I heard that a woman can no longer be granted a royal title after her 40th birthday, but if my cousin really wants to get a royal title, it's not impossible. If she can't do it in this life, she can still do it in the next life." Yinlia was angry and annoyed. "You said I am old." Fan Qingjao seemed to be aware of his faux pas, and quickly covered his mouth and widened his eyes. "Looking at my cousin, she is already over 40 years old. Am I wrong?" "Yinlia, did someone ask you to repeat it again?" The daughters-in-law in each room looked at Grandma Chao, who had a particularly ugly face, and were laughing to death. They really thought that with a few coins, they could show off their power in the Hua family. "Even if we spoil you, there is no way that Xiao Qingjao will spoil you. With you." Cao Lishan on the side was dumbfounded. As far as she could remember, this was the first time she saw her mother being so angry. Tao Yuxian looked at the scene and didn't know what to say. He didn't expect to live in peace, but he didn't expect that his cousin's daughter-in-law was still very domineering over the years. Tao Yuxian was not easy to lecture when people came to visit him. He could only look at Fan Qingjao and said, "Go and sit down." Although Fan Qingjao didn't want Yinlia to have an easy time, she still had to obey her grandmother's words. Besides, Yinlia came to the Hua family as a guest. If she went too far, others would just say that the Hua family didn't know how to treat guests. Muyan was already in high spirits from watching the show. When she saw the third sister coming over, she quickly gave up the chair beside her and said, "Third sister, this way." Fan Qingjao walked over and sat down, smiling and said, "Are you feeling energetic?" Muyan smiled secretly. "It's hard to think without being energetic when my third sister is here." Fan Qingjao smiled and tapped the tip of Muyan's nose. Seeing that Muyan was wearing thin clothes, he took off his shawl and put it around Muyan's shoulders. This scene happened to be witnessed by Cao Lishan, who watched quietly as Fan Qingjao Muyan, unable to stop the envy and expectation in his dark eyes. Muyan noticed Cao Lishan's gaze, and took the initiative to say to Fan Qingjao, "Third sister, this is Lishan's cousin. She is of the same age as me, but the month is half a month younger than me." Fan Qingjao looked at Cao Lishan and smiled lightly, "Cousin Lishan." Thinking of her mother's dark complexion, Cao Lishan was still a little frightened by Fan Qingjao. "Biao Qingjao, cousin. Before Cousin Lishan came here, my grandmother said that Cousin Lishan was well behaved and sensible. Now that I saw her, it really made me feel ashamed. Now that I have entered the Hua family, Cousin Lishan doesn't need to be restrained. If you need anything, just talk to the people in the house. Just open your mouth." Fan Kinjao looked at Caolishan, somewhat surprised. He didn't expect that such a arrogant mother could raise such a timid daughter. Caolishan also didn't expect Fan Kinjao to have such a talkative side, so she nodded quickly, okay, okay. In the eyes of others, this scene was just a normal thing, but when Yin Lia saw it, she was very angry. Originally, she wanted to cause trouble because Fan Kinjao looked down on their mother and daughter, but now looking at Fan Kinjao's attitude towards her daughter, if she continued to make trouble, she, as an elder, would be the one to care about them. End of this chapter.